Okay, so today's topic I'll talk about these exchange forces. They are related to, basically the problem is related to, first part is related to a kind of physical phenomena which arises purely because of the symmetric and anti-symmetric structure of the wave function. So this topic is in the syllabus, but probably I'm not going to ask you, I don't think I'm going to ask you directly a question on this because it's pretty straightforward. But this one more thing I'll discuss, which is there in the assignment problem, is that how to write down or how to deal with wave functions when there is a spin part. So there are, like, you can think of a wave function which has a special part and a spin part. So far we have discussed only wave functions of this form, psi, li, ri. But then there could be a spin degrees of freedom which is there, like electrons have spin, we know that. It is not just psi. So this li is n, l, m, and this is the r, theta, phi. But then there is also a spin, which is which I write as ms. So then how to deal with things like that, and what are there are some interesting phenomena related to that. And even though I am doing it as a, like, just spending one lecture, not spending that much time, but it's a huge, very important topic, and that is like almost the entire chemistry and everything. A lot of topics, lot of problems can be understood, physical topic problems can be understood based on these ideas. And I will encourage you to read it from, and it's easy to read. So I focused on building your foundation. So if you understood that your foundation is strong, then this part is really easy to read from Griffiths level book or any other book. Okay, so let's talk about this exchange force. So what's the idea? The idea is, this is again from Griffiths. It's very simple topic. You can read it and understand in 30 minutes maximum. So let's say I have a particle at a state psi a x and another at psi b x. It's a 1D object, so it's x is a continuous variable, and I can write it x1 and x2. And then I can write the combined wave function in these three cases. First, if it is distinguishable, you know this already, this is very simple. Then it is psi x1 x2, psi a x1, psi b x2. And then it can be symmetric, indistinguishable, and symmetric, and indistinguishable anti-symmetric. So this one I write as psi x1 x2 1 by root 2 psi a x1 psi b x2 plus psi b x1 psi a x2. Okay, and in this case it will be simply the same. So now I want to calculate the expectation value of the distance between these two particles. So how I can do it? I can calculate usually this is done as the RMS. So because there is a plus minus sign otherwise. So I calculate the square of the distance and then I take a root after the calculation. So how the square will look like? The square will look like x1 square x2 square minus 2 x1 x2. And now I can calculate it in these three cases. So if I do the calculation in the first case, which is distinguishable. So x1 square. So you know the calculation is very simple. It is just psi a x1 square dx1 psi b x2 square dx2. So this will give me 1 because the wave function on its own, they are single particle orbitals, so their square over the entire space has to be 1. And the second part will give me a square in the a part. Similarly, I can calculate x2 square. That will give me x square b. and x1 x2, which you can show very easily. The x1 will come in this part, x2 will come in this part, and you will get xa xb. So then this whole quantity is x square a plus x square b minus 2 xa xb. So now, given that we know that, so now just a sec. So now let's do the calculation for identical particles. So let's take the symmetric case. So can you write down, can you tell me what will be the expression for the symmetric case? So what is this quantity? How do we write down in general? So this is the psi, they call it distinguishable, so D. So what is this expression actually, x1 square?
Expectation value of the square of x1 square basically.
You just narrated what is written there. I mean, I'm saying what is the formula?
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. What's the formula of calculating this?
It's written there only.
Yeah, it is written there, but can I write it down one
Oh,
step back?
oh, okay, okay, okay. It would be like, are you talking about the expectation value formula like the x square minus
Generally, yeah,
and
no,
yeah, yeah,
just x1 square.
Integration x1 square and mod of psi square
Yeah,
dx.
psi d
oh, okay, like that.
x1 x2 square, right?
Yes.
Dx1 dx2. That thing is this, right? So by that, what will this be?
It would be the integration of, yeah, that psi plus basically. So one root, so it would be 1/2 because it would be squared,
Dx1
and
dx2. So how many terms will there be? Because notice this psi plus has 2 terms. Right? So when you square it, how many terms will there be?
so will it be 2 itself because keeping the when we are doing x1, so first term is psi a x1, so we will integrate
So
over that
first term will be this psi a x1
yeah, whole square,
mod square dx1
x1 square, sir.
psi b x2 dx2, right?
Yes, sir. And x1
And
at the first would be squared.
yeah, this is square, right? What about the second term?
So will there be dx square?
Hmm? No, why?
Will there be, yeah, dx, sorry, dx2, that
Yeah,
part
so here it is
should be there.
dx2, here dx1.
Okay, okay, okay. And then similarly, it would be like x1
So
square
this
x.
guy contains 2 terms, right?
Yes, sir.
So when you square it, there will be 4 terms, right? Because it is like a plus b and a star. So a star plus b star, a plus b, right? So there will be 4 terms, 4 type of cross terms. So let's
Yes.
write down these 4 cross terms. Psi b x1 dx1 psi a x2 dx2. So this symmetry or anti-symmetry. So depending on that, so this one has either plus or minus. So 2 terms, the square terms, which is a square and b square type terms, they will be always plus, but these ab terms can be minus. So they will be either plus or minus. So they are a star a type of term. That's why I write it as square. Square means a star a. or A star B, which means A star B are this type of term. This is A star B, and then there is a B star A also. So that is x1 square psi B x1 star psi A x1 dx1 psi A x2 star psi B x2 dx2, right? So everybody with me? It's a very simple calculation, but since we have a lot of time, that's why I'm going so slowly, because I have very little to talk about today. So can you tell me what will be that integral? What will happen to each of these terms in the integral?
So the cross term will be, yeah, what you say. Will the cross term go to 0 because they are
Why?
like psi A and psi B are basically two different states, right? So they
Hmm.
would be orthogonal. So the cross
Good.
term should go to 0.
So the cross term should go to 0. So then you are left with so basically this much, just this. So same thing will happen for x2 square, because x2 square is symmetric calculation. So you get half x square A plus x square B plus A. Here you get AB, here you get BA, but they are basically same thing because they are just added. So similarly, you can do the x1, x2 calculation. It is, if you have understood this, I don't need to do that calculation. It is just the same, but except there these cross terms will not disappear because they will have this x1 here and x2 here. So that means they cannot disappear. So you understood that, right? Why it cannot disappear? So you get this. So this xab is basically the term which has a ax and then a psi a and psi b. So these terms, earlier there was only psi a psi b integral that was vanishing because they were orthonormal. But now if you put a x in the middle, then they need not vanish, and that's because the x operator acting on psi a can have a projection on psi b. That need not be orthogonal, right?
So, and one more question. So, yeah, we started with x1 square, yeah, expectation value of x1 square and came up with x square A and plus x square B in the
Yeah.
symmetric or anisymmetric. What does that notation mean? The expectation value of x square with A state.
So that means it's just the square of x in the A state, and that could be, so one is tagged for particle one. But now when I am calculating this, when I'm writing this, it's the whole operator, right? Sorry, whole wave function a and b together. That is why
Yes.
it is just the expectation value of the whole x square in the whole in the state A. Okay? It need not be the for particle one or particle two, because I put everything together, but now some of them vanished, and now we are left with that much, right? So you get a x b a x a b. So that is basically x a x b plus minus x a b square. And this xab is basically x expectation value within the states A and B. So that is how your x1, x2 will come. So now basically you are left with the answer in the plus minus. Now this part is new. This was earlier not there in your distinguishable particle. But this tells you that the result of this calculation, so this part is the distinguishable calculation, xd delta xd square. So this tells you, just because of the fact that your particles are antisymmetric or symmetric, and that is because they are indistinguishable, then their average distance between them will be less or more than what it would have been if they were not if they would have been distinguishable. So this thing is called an exchange force. So it is like a force because it tells you that symmetric wave function particle will tend to, so symmetric means plus, will tend to come closer, and anti-symmetric wave function particle will tend to go further. Now this statement looks a little peculiar if you have not gone through this calculation. If you try to think it on a standalone statement, it just tells you there is no actual force acting. So that's why this word exchange force is basically a classical, a reminiscence of what you know classical experience, that if you keep two particles and they are tend to come together, then you call them, there is some attraction force is working, and if they tend to go further, some repulsive force is working. But this is not really a physical force, because you cannot see any, there is no electromagnetic gravity or any force is acting. It's just two particles which are neutral with respect to all that. But still they have a higher probability to come closer if they are, just because of their quantum nature of symmetric or antisymmetric wave function. And there is no classical analogy of this phenomena. So this fact that a pair of particles can tend to come closer or further because of their wave function being symmetric or antisymmetric, that's a purely quantum phenomena, and this is analogous to a force, and that's why this force is called exchange force. But there is one puzzle because of that, which tells you that that puzzle is not really a puzzle, but it appears like a puzzle because you are not taking into account the whole wave function. So the puzzle is following. Let's consider the hydrogen molecule. So the hydrogen molecule is basically two hydrogen atom, which means a single nucleus of plus charge and the electron of minus charge roaming around it, minus charge, and they are very close to each other. So in principle, you can say that any two wave functions in the universe, I mean any two electrons in the universe will have some overlap on them, right? Although that overlap is so tiny that you need not consider that. So I can do a very small calculation to discuss that point in a moment. But let's see at least this point, that how it leads to a puzzle. So let's say I have two electrons which are very close to each other. Then by this logic, so these electrons are fermions. So that means they have an antisymmetric wave function. And well, so let me come to that point later. Let me just say these two electrons are distinguishable. If they're distinguishable, then their average distance will be something like this. But if they're indistinguishable, there are two possibilities. If they are like bosonic, then what will happen? Then they will have an attractive force, which means the electrons will try to come closer. Right? Will try to come closer. And if they are trying to come closer, then that means for that the protons will be attracted because the electrons are coming closer and the protons are opposite charge. So this whole thing will become a compact thing and they will be bound. And that's what you expect in a molecule, right? That's so in bosons, they will be bound. But in fermions, that will not happen because fermions will say go far apart. I mean they're more likely to go far apart, which means it's better for them that if the electrons are not together, I mean if they are far apart, so then they will be unbound. But we definitely know that doesn't happen, because if that happened, that would have happened, we wouldn't have been there. Because if that would have happened, hydrogen molecule would have been unstable. if it would have been decayed, immediately decayed, because they will try to go far apart. If hydrogen molecule is unstable, then there will be no life, right? I mean, nothing will be there, right? Everything is passed from hydrogen molecule. So that's definitely not happening. But we know electrons are fermion. So what is the missing ingredient? Why this is leading to a problem? So can somebody think about it? Any comment?
Sir, in this symmetric and anti-symmetric thing, we are not considering any other forces, right?
No, there is no other forces. So I am talking about just 2 electrons.
Yeah, so that isn't that the case? It's like we are not considering, while we are putting the argument for the distinguishable particle or anything, we are telling that they are not interacting with each other. But in realistic case, if we have them, they will
Yeah, so
have
that's a good
electromagnetic.
point. So you can ask this question that if 2 electrons, but by nature, in fact, this is true, because if you want to give a full account of this problem, you need to take into account more things, which means if 2 electrons are come close, then you have to account the fact that they are two both charge negative things, which means there will be a Coulomb repulsion, right?
Yes, sir.
But we are somehow not saying anything about that. But by that logic, then there will be no atom will be stable. I mean, no molecule will be stable. At least hydrogen molecule will not be stable. So that's a problem. So we know that hydrogen molecule exists. So there must be something which tells me that the hydrogen molecule is stable. That means the exchange force or some other force that must overcome the force which is caused by because of 2 electrons coming very close to each other, and that force happened to be this exchange force. But to treat it fully, so now you are talking about a competition between these 2 forces, right? Now you are bringing the question that I have a exchange force and I have an electromagnetic force. Which one will win? So when you bring a competition of these 2 forces, then you have to bring a scale into picture, and that is what we will discuss in perturbation theory. But right now I am ignoring that part, the electromagnetic force, and we are saying that even though they are coming close or far from each other, the force because of the electromagnetic interaction, given their distance, is small enough. Now you can argue that how do I know it is small enough? That's a very good question. So for that, you can do a calculation. You can say what is actually the size of a hydrogen molecule, and you can take the distance, you can calculate the Coulomb force, and you can calculate the force, this exchange force, and you can indeed show that the scale is so low, it's the exchange force which decides the fate of the molecule. Okay, that is why I choose to ignore it for time being. But if you want, you are right that in principle that should be included, but we will discuss just later, that if I have 2 forces and one forces is much smaller than the other force, then how to treat with that.
So is this the same like the small enough distance that the electromagnetic force is not so what you say visible? Is that the exact reason why we say that the Coulomb's law is valid for a distance above Fermi level, like 10 to the power minus 14?
No. Coulomb law is always valid.
Coulomb's law is not valid, like valid under the Fermi's Fermi distance, right? Like 10 to the
What
power
do you mean
minus
by
14.
that? No.
14.
Why? What's the
It,
reason?
I don't know. Like this is the thing that we do in high school. That
Huh?
like yeah, I don't know.
I don't
But
know about this statement. I mean,
okay.
Coulomb law is always valid, but the question is when there are other forces present, then it becomes dominating. For example, as you, like when you go to the level of, like, maybe the distance you are saying, Fermi distance or whatever, maybe the strong interaction, weak interaction are the dominating forces. That is a different thing. But in principle, within the physics of Coulomb's law, there is nothing that tells you that Coulomb's law break down below a certain distance scale. There is no fundamental theory which tells it.
Oh, okay,
Coulomb's law
okay,
is
okay.
not a derived law; it's a fundamental law.
Okay, okay, okay.
Okay, So the point here is that we are missing the fact that electrons have spin. So the wave function we are dealing with doesn't have the spin part. So the full wave function of an electron will have n, l, m. So let me combine this whole thing as some alpha, some x, the location r, and a part which is s, the spin part, which I write it as chi s. So this is the spinor, the two component spinor part, right? That is how you describe the full electron. So now the question comes, question you have to ask, that is this whole, when I say and electrons are fermions, that is because of this whole wave function is fermionic. That means this whole thing is antisymmetric. Now it is made of two parts. So if a two-part thing has to be antisymmetric, then it can happen in two ways. So let's say there is a psi part and chi part. So these have to be antisymmetric, these have to be symmetric, or these have to be symmetric, these have to be antisymmetric. So these are the two ways this whole thing can be antisymmetric. Just a moment. Or the other option is this is symmetric, this is symmetric, this is symmetric, this is symmetric. Then the whole, these antisymmetric, or symmetric, symmetric. In this case, the whole thing will become symmetric. Right? These are the only two possibilities. Okay, someone was saying something.
Yeah. So my question is like, as of so far we've been considering the fact that if a general wave function is antisymmetric, then you'd say that it's a fermion. But then right now you're considering the case of spin coming in. So are you saying that in general, like in the case of an electron, you need for the complete wave function to be antisymmetric? But then in general, if you have a wave function that is antisymmetric, if there's a spinless particle that has a wave function that is antisymmetric, that is also a fermion. So why doesn't isn't the spin part important anyway?
Yeah, so first of all, spinless particles, it's a one must be careful about the spinless particle statement. So this spinless particle is not so common in the kind of examples you are going to encounter in probably most of the MSc level.
No, I understand that, but then earlier when you defined a fermion and a boson,
I didn't consider spin.
Exactly. But so you do not need the spin to define it as fermion.
So I don't need even a spin. So I can so let's say when I earlier defined the wave function, I defined it like that, right? So it has some quantum number and a position, right? That was a complete description of a state, and I developed every formalism based on this, right?
Yeah.
Now this thing can be made of a tuple, right? A bunch of.
You're breaking it apart into being.
Now I'm breaking it up. So this L need not to be one number, because this orbital is completely specified. For example, for a hydrogen atom problem, just for thinking, this is made of N, L, M, and MS, right? MZ.
Okay.
Right? So this is made of this whole 4 integers. So this gives orbit number. This gives you the total angular momentum, and this gives you the orbital angular momentum. This gives you the spin angular momentum, and this gives you whether the Z component is up or down. Right? You need all these integers to specify this whole thing. Now, so far in the description, you lead to this anomaly if you ignore spin. So now you have to ignore spin, and spin is a special case because spin, this part makes this wave function, like it gives you a special form of this wave function. That's why you can split it up. This is spinor, which can have a 2x2 component or 2x1 component. So now I will tell you that what are the possibilities in this part. So now you have, if you want your whole wave function to be antisymmetric, so there is a space part and then there is a spin part. So they together will decide the fate of the wave function. So this total thing will be antisymmetric. Now we discussed that this part will come closer if they are bosons. So now I want the whole wave function to be boson, and that can happen in two ways, which is either antisymmetric or symmetric. So then we know that hydrogen atom, the hydrogen molecule is in a, so now this part for 2 spins, what are the possibilities? We know these are the possibilities for this. So this is either 0, 0, which means up, down, minus, down, up by √2. So that's a singlet, and a singlet is an antisymmetric state. because if you flip these two spins, you pick up a minus sign. Or you have 1 1. So this I am writing in the total angular momentum basis. So 1 1 is up up, or 1 0, which is up up plus down down by root 2, or 1 minus 1, which is down down. So this thing, this triplet is a symmetric wave function, and this singlet, which is total spin 0, is an anti-symmetric wave function. So now if this part is anti-symmetric, then this part can be anti-symmetric, and that means anti-symmetric means they can am I screwing up something? I want this to be symmetric. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I'm screwing up. So I want my total wave function, my spatial part of the wave function, to be bosonic, which means I want them to be symmetric in order for the molecule to be stable, right? So that can happen only in one way, which is this way. That can happen in only one way, which is this way. That means the only possible state it can happen when this part is antisymmetric, and if this part is antisymmetric, then this have to be a singlet state. So that means the total spin of hydrogen molecule has to be spin 0, and that is indeed true. So the wave function stability demands that the spatial part has to be bosonic or symmetric, and the spin part has to be antisymmetric, and that is how you find that the hydrogen molecule has total spin 0. So that is basically, now you can play this game again and again, and you can see that to be true in many different cases, like the whole periodic table you can look at, and you can try to start explaining that why some molecule exists or why some multi-electron atom exists, and if they exist, what kind of spin state can they be, and that analysis can go very long, and you can go on like to develop the Hund's rule and all these principles you learned in chemistry. All these things can be worked out from there. So that is one point I wanted to make, and that point will come very useful. So in that context, you look at this problem in Griffith, and that is exactly the problem I gave you in your assignment. That now I gave you 2 particles or 3 particles which have spin. Now try to write down the wave function if it is totally antisymmetric or totally symmetric. Now, if the total wave function has to be symmetric or antisymmetric, you have to discuss its 2 parts, the spatial part and spin part, and you have to look at what are the possibilities in the spin part and what are the possibilities in the spatial part, right? So that is the problem I wanted to discuss.
So one thing, so here the entire atom is acting like a boson.
No, the entire atom is acting. Entire electronic wave function is antisymmetric, so acting like a fermion, but it part of the spatial part is acting like a boson.
The spatial part. Okay. So, got it, sir.
Because I want the spatial part to be bosonic in order for the stability of the system.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Got it, sir.
Yeah.
But
so
then, okay. So the thing is, like, if you consider the fact that a hydrogen molecule on its own, hydrogen atom on its own is boson.
Atom doesn't have that problem.
Exactly. So you're talking about the case where 2 hydrogen atoms are coming together, right?
I'm talking about the molecule.
Okay, wait, I'm confused. So the point is that if you want 2 hydrogen atoms to come together, you need both of those atoms to be bosonic.
Yeah, where
so that there will be
you get the question of singlet, 2 spins, you need 2 particles, right?
Yeah, that's fine. So my point is, like, if the individual hydrogen atoms are bosonic, they will anyway be attracted to each other because of the exchange forces, right?
Yeah, but I'm not talking about atoms. I'm talking about the electrons, because the electron is the chemical bond is formed by the electrons, right?
Okay, like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a covalent bond.
Right. Okay. Now I was just considering the fact that if you're just talking about the repulsion.
But even if I talk about this, like, I'm talking about the electrons as so. Yeah. So now it's a good point. I'll come back to this. But right now I'm talking about just the electrons. So because these 2 electrons are very close to each other, that is when they form this bond and all. So the protons are very far from the electron. So that is why you can assume that the protons are not you are not considering the protons yet into this game.
Okay.
You can in principle consider the proton, but then that's not a problem actually, because the proton part is even so. Is your concern is why I'm not taking the proton electron the total object which is proton and electron together?
Exactly. Yeah. That was
Yeah, but they are distinguishable, right?
Yeah, but my point is, even without
So
talking
there is
about
no symmetric antisymmetric question. The only
exactly,
symmetric antisymmetric question comes when you take these two together.
yeah, I got that fact. I'm saying like even without considering that, you could still say that these two atoms will come together because the individual atoms are bosonic. So why do we need to consider this part at
No,
all?
wait. Sorry, what did you say? Individual atom is bosonic? Individual atom is not bosonic, right?
It's a hydrogen atom. It is one proton and one electron. Both of them are half spin. So the total spin is just one, right?
Yeah, but they are so the total speed. That is again the problem you are making. So the whole wave function is proton times the electron, right? But the proton has a spin, the PS, and electron has a spin. So when you say the whole thing is bosonic or not, then you have to consider all the parts, right?
Hmm.
The electrons part, the protons part, and then the electron spin and the proton spin. All these four things together.
Hmm.
So are you considering all these things and declaring it to be boson? Can you do that?
I'm
First of all,
asking. That was
no,
the
they are not,
question.
because they are distinguishable particles. Right?
So you can't say that the hydrogen atom is bosonic.
No, because they are made of two distinguishable objects.
Okay. Okay, fair enough.
You have a
Yeah,
two body system.
yeah,
They
I
are
get.
distinguishable.
Yeah.
The question of symmetry, antisymmetry only comes if your Hamiltonian or the system itself has the permutation symmetry. It's made of
Right, right.
identical particles.
Yeah, okay, makes
Right?
sense. Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
Okay. Now then I'm going to make an even more crazy statement which might bend your mind a little more.
So
Is
there's a
that
question in the chat
Yeah.
box which is really interesting. Ashwin is saying that is there a concept of work done for exchange force?
Yeah. So the good question. So no, because there is no force. Because in order to work done, you need a force, actual force. If a vector which has a force dimension. So I
Pseudo
cannot.
force?
What is pseudo force? Define pseudo force.
He is saying, I was not saying, it's like it's really
Yeah.
interesting.
So no. So the point is there is no classical analogy of that. So I use the word force because it is our classical brain thinks that way. Because if two objects are coming closer, you would expect there is some force which is bringing them closer, right? Some attractive force. And if they are going further, then there is some force which is taking them apart, some repulsive force. That is your classical expectation. And there is no such picture here. There is no such picture here. So first of all, let me tell you one thing which I emphasized a lot in the previous semester. There is no concept of force in quantum context. There is nothing called force. It's all about a game of potential and all that. So you don't even need the force. The force is a very classical concept. They release energy and all. Yeah, so I mean it's not a force. That's my point. There is no force at all here. I use the word force just because it's our classical mind likes to think it that way. So it's a exchange. It's a exchange energy, you can say. So they want to come closer. So it's basically the symmetric or antisymmetric character makes them want to come closer or further. So that is it. So are you satisfied with that explanation, or you are not happy? You want a force? If you want a force, then calculate energy, take a derivative. But that's not force, right? Force is a concept. So where does the energy come from? Bosonic like special. I mean, it's much better if you talk. If you write, then I read, and then it's like, I mean, that is what you do when you write email. So there is, first of all, I have not yet discussed about any energy, but yeah, if you bring it into picture, then of course there is a classical energy which will be increasing or decreasing. So why do you need a energy to come anywhere from? All I'm saying. I mean, why do you need energy? All I'm saying that if the particles are symmetric, they will try to come closer. If they are antisymmetric, they will try to go further. Where is the question of energy?
But there should be some physical reason for this to happen, right? It's not like
That is the
mathematically.
physical reason is the wave function, the character of the wave function.
That's it. There's like no
That's it.
other reason. Oh God.
No, and that is the peculiarity of quantum world. So you want so you might think it is some paranormal thing, right? If you have two chairs and they suddenly came together, you will think it some ghost is something, right? So yeah, it is indeed like that. That's why quantum world is so peculiar. There is no reason for two of these things to come close, as long as you think classically. But quantum mechanical wave function tells you they will try to be closer. They will tend to be closer if they are symmetric or other way. Yeah, definitely how helium atom behaves and all those things, and that is true. And but that requires a bit of perturbation theory. Wait, so what is this about? I just wanted to see something. Yeah, so I think that is why the helium molecule is, you cannot have a stable helium molecule. I think so, but I have to check this statement a little more carefully. You can use this, extend this concept in any cases. It's always true. Is it clear so far? This is peculiar. So the reason you are finding it peculiar because you are using your classical thinking, and this is always true. This is always true in the world of quantum mechanics. If you try to explain it from your classical background, you will always find it. You have to bring some more and more weird things into picture. Okay, is it clear or you are still unhappy? It is just the structure. Structure of the wave function is telling you it must be closer, and that is consistent with the stability of the helium molecule. Right? Now you can tell that why. Is there dude, right? I mean, right, talk to me. I mean, what is you are writing? I mean, it is impossible to read, and then I read, and oh my god, and it wastes so much time. Anyways, no, I don't think so. There is no analogy. There is no analogy because you don't have the symmetry, indistinguishable particle symmetry exchange, this exchange symmetry concept, this permutation symmetry concept. There is no analogy of that in anywhere else. That is why this is purely quantum phenomena, and that's what tells you the existence of the world. I mean, existence of everything requires quantum mechanics, and you can even take it as a project for your, I mean, the whole chemistry is built on that, first of all, and any stability of any molecule and atom is built on that. And you can also go one step further, and you can look at, there are also other sides of that. For example, why there is a volume of everything. For example, you can ask the question that if I, so the question is following, that if I try to squeeze a matter, so for example, why matter has a volume, why they are occupying this much space. I mean, if I put the atoms together, then there is a huge amount of empty space in any matter, right? This is why it's like an object occupies a volume. If I take the actual atoms and molecules, their total area or total volume is much smaller than the actual volume of the matter. So why the matter has a volume? Why does it require that much space to sit? So that needs that requires quantum mechanics. You need quantum mechanics to explain that. Think about it. It's discussed in Feynman lectures. So similarly, so quantum mechanics is not just a theory or not just a formalism to explain things better. It's an essential theory. Without you cannot explain stability of matter, existence of volume or anything. Right? Is it clear or there confusion?
One clarification about the formalism. So you said that for the entire, like the type of wave function that you would need to take for for the electron would be something of the form where the spatial function is bosonic and the spin part is exactly. The spatial part is symmetric and the spin part is antisymmetric, right? For this for the electron. Was it because so that then and the reason that you said that that has to be the form of the wave function is because you want the entire wave function of the electron to be antisymmetric. That's it, right? That's right. Okay.
Yes.
I just need to clarify.
Because otherwise, if you can somehow show that this system is, you want the system to be unstable, then you have to, then that has to be consistent with that this joint spin state to be triplet. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
Now there is one more thing I wanted. There are two more things I wanted to do, but the time is up. But let me say it anyways, because this is not a part of syllabus, so you don't need to be here. So this statement is a little more philosophical and more deep. Okay. So this tells you basically the idea behind this statement is, so truly speaking, all the electrons in the world are indistinguishable, right? So you can say that there is a giant state which is made of all the antisymmetric combination, right? -1 to the power p of all the electrons in the world, right? So let me write it as this. All the electrons in the world forming some kind of a giant, so these are like infinite electrons, or a antisymmetric state of infinite electrons. But in that way, you cannot really talk about a single electron in the universe at all. But then why are we allowed to do such a thing? We make an approximation. We say that two electrons which are very far apart, and that you can see this wave function. So this exchange force is actually always present, because even if these two electrons are not part of this helium atom or hydrogen atom which are coming very close or something, these two electrons can be any two electrons in the universe, right? Because it's when I wrote down this thing, I know I made that requirement that this two electron has to be something very close or something very far, right? So this whole statement is true always, but this force is negligible. This force is negligible because this term, this xab term, is basically x psi a psi b, right? This is this term. So that is the overlap between these two electrons. So now we know for hydrogen atom and helium atom, this thing is falling exponentially. This thing is falling exponentially because e to the power minus r from the origin. That's what we worked out. So that is why this overlap is actually negligible. So you can say that there is no such thing when they are like two random electrons. Only when this force becomes visibly strong, when they start coming closer and comes like close enough. Right? So that is the point. And then again, this interesting question comes into which Adil asked, that if they are coming close enough, then there is another classical force is coming into picture, which is the electromagnetic force. Then how do you compare between these two? That's a good question, and that is a subject of perturbation theory. And then so basically you can argue that this force is still weaker than this force, and that is why you can explain the stability of the electron. And this problem becomes more and more complicated when you consider different kind of force. For example, in strong interaction, the distance is such that first of all, the character of strong interaction is that when you bring the particles closer, they act as if they are independent, which means they don't see each other. If you try to take them apart, then they start attracting each other more, which is very peculiar. That is not the case for any other force. In gravity or electromagnetism, if you try to bring them closer, then whatever force it is, repulsive or attractive, it becomes close. But if they are very far apart, their influence on each other is very small. So that is why, for that reason, it's very hard to take the quarks apart. You cannot see the quarks independently. The quarks always exist inside a meson or a hadron, like that. So you also require that because of the scale of the problem and all that. And it is all a like part of a grand design, you can say, because it is like that. That is why everything is stable and everything exists. But you cannot go, of course, ask the opposite question that why it is like that. Then you can have some anthropological explanation. Right? So that is basically so that is something you can think about.
Sir, while mentioning this last part, is there any basis states description that we can ascribe to this?
What does it mean?
Like you said that all electrons in the universe
Yeah.
are indistinguishable.
So
So is
you
there
can-
any way of
So
giving,
if
like
you
we know
have
that all
a-
of them should have anti-symmetric wave functions.
Yeah, the basic state is just like all the electrons, position of all the electrons. Then they have some quantum number depending on which kind of Hamiltonian, local Hamiltonian or global Hamiltonian they are in. So you can see there is a global Hamiltonian of the universe. If that is in principle, you can say universe is a closed system. There are infinitely many particles. They are made of electrons and protons and all these kind of particles. Of all the electrons in the universe are of course indistinguishable. So that must, then there must be something, you can say that the wave function of the universe should be all electrons. So product state of all electron, product state of antisymmetric of all electron times product state of all quarks, like that, right? In principle, that should be your universe wave function. So the statement is, then you can say that the electron part, you can write it all the electron and their locations, all the location of all the electron, which theoretical, of course, it is a impossible thing to do in practice, but in principle there is such a wave function, and they must have their quantum numbers, which means they have some spins and they have some electronic orbital and all that, right? So that is basically the idea behind that. So if you think of a basis state, in principle there is such a basis state, but you always work in some approximate local basis.
Okay, and this is just going to be only one basis state, like you can't have multiple for.
No,
Just
you
in
can choose one basis state. Of course, there are multiple basis state, but in principle, there is only one basis state, which is the eigenstate of the universe Hamiltonian, which you don't know, of course.
Right. So for each of them, we are going to give one specific basis state and then take that particular.
No. What do you mean by that? So if
like
I have
for an electron, like the wave function
if
that we
I have,
consider.
so forget many electrons. Just think 2 electrons.
Okay.
So if it is psi a x1, it is the single particle state of the one electron, and this is the single particle state of the this second electron. So that is your complete wave function. If it is antisymmetric, this if they are distinguishable, but since they are indistinguishable, so then the whole electron wave function is this, right? With some normalization factor. Similarly, you can write such a wave function for all the electrons in the universe, in principle.
Okay.
So that is
Yes.
the statement. Right?
Got it.
Now the interesting point is that suppose we want to calculate that what is the probability that the electron, this electron, that the electron which has a label A in state A, that is confined in some small spatial region R. Right, some small spatial region R is there, where some electron which is at level A located. So how will I calculate such a probability? That will be dx R dy psi a x psi by mod square, if they would have been distinguishable, right? So this thing I can take out the so this is the R part, right? Only the R region, but this Y is the full Y region. So that means in principle you can think it is all the other 2 dimensions of the like in 3D I can write it like that, or not 2 dimension, I can say all the coordinates of all other electrons except that electron which I want to see where it is located. What is the probability that it is located in the region R? So it will be R dx psi a x square. So this will be the case if the electrons had a wave function like this, but the electrons have a wave function like this. So for that I have to calculate this quantity, some normalization. If it is 1 by root 2, it will be 2. So then it will be psi a star x psi b star. So I am actually changed the notation a bit. I was earlier using x1, x2, now I am using x and y. They are equivalent. They are not two dimensions x, y. Okay. Minus psi b star x, psi a, y. Actually, let me go back to the notation. It's confusing otherwise. So I should have written x1, x2. So here it is. X1, x2, x1. This is x1, this is x2, this is x2, this is x1. This is x1, x1, x2, this is x1, this is x2, this is x1, this is x2. So this square will be this psi a x1, psi b x2 minus x1 psi a x2. Okay. So now I can calculate again this same quantity here for this wave function. So this will become P, that the probability that you find the electron with quantum number A at region R. So that will be this number normalization times R dx psi A x1 square. So this will be, all these terms will appear, right? So I am not writing all the terms, so I just leave it for you to do these two lines of algebra. But at the end you will find this quantity to like that, some constant R dA psi A x square x1 square, and this is exactly this quantity, plus you will find this term, or minus, actually I think you will find it minus. You will get this R dx1 dx2, again in the R region because you are squaring it. So psi A x1 star, psi B x, psi B x2, psi A x2, x1 x1 x2 x2. So you will find that what is the probability that you will find an electron with quantum number A in the region R. That probability is dependent on all the wave functions of all other electrons in the universe. In this case, I am just talking about 2 electrons, but you can imagine if you had n electron, that would have been a more complicated term, and that's why the algebra is much more complicated, but that's why I showed it by 2 electrons. So this is like an overlap term of all other electrons. But in principle, in practice, if you are dealing with an electron, now you can plug in some actual wave function, e to the power minus some number by r square, like some Gaussian wave function or some exponential atomic wave function, and you can do this calculation. You can show that this influence is actually negligible. So in principle, when you are dealing with one electron, it's actually entangled with all other electrons in the universe. But in practice, that entanglement is negligible because the probability of doing anything with that will not be affected by all the other electrons in the universe. But that is not true when the electrons are close by, which means if you have a multi-electron atom, then the electrons are very nearby. Then other electron, this term will not be negligible. Then this probability will influence by that. So that is why, even though it is not often discussed or appreciated, in a multi-electron setup, the electrons always influence each other. And whenever you are calculating anything, you are basically working with an entangled state. Right? So that is the idea, and that is the origin of, that idea exploited heavily in theory. You will see that everything, as if like the whole universe has a field, and there are excitations on this field, and they are anyway in principle correlated. Although that correlation is negligible because they are. So this is a little mind twisting idea, and it's a true idea because the theory apparently suggests that, and there are evidence that it is true because when they are close enough, they start influencing each other. Of course, you know that. But that is basically the point. Right? Makes sense, or you are very puzzled or in denial?
Yes, so the 2-electron case made sense. So extrapolating
So
should be okay.
then think of what happens to that n electron. It
Yes,
will be the same.
Yeah.
Okay, good. This is a little above beyond the course idea, but I want you to think about it maybe later after the exam. But apart from that, everything else is clear, right? I mean, apart from that is also clear as I understood, but you don't need to bother about it immediately now.
Yes.
Yeah, so far is fine. But one
Yeah.
question. So if you have an individual electron and you say that it's fermionic and you say that it has half integral spin. So why is it that for an individual electron to be a fermion, you need or not just electron, for any individual particle to be fermionic, why do you need for it to have half integral spin?
I mean, that statement I told you earlier, right? That this is a theorem, and that can be proved only in the presence of Lorentz invariance, and that is why you have to wait for it till QFT. And it's called spin statistics theorem. It tells you all half integer objects are fermionic, all whole integer objects are bosonic. Why and how, you have to wait for that, because it can be proved only for Lorentz invariant theories, and we have not done yet relativistic quantum mechanics. And even after we do that, it requires some more sophisticated technique. But this is a theorem that can be mathematically proved for
Okay.
Lorentz invariant theories.
Okay.
Yeah. Any more questions? There is actually one more example I wanted to do, but I didn't get time. Maybe tomorrow I'll do, and maybe I'll skip something else. That I wanted to explicitly do a problem when I load some n equal to some 100 electrons or 20 electrons and show you pictorially where it goes, how it distributes itself, if it is bosonic or fermionic. I'll talk about it tomorrow. And these ideas are behind everything. Like, you will, I didn't get time to talk about this, but there are a lot of cool examples on this. Like, you can look at this, like why metals exist, why metal behaves in a certain way, why matter has volume, and everything. Like, even why stars exist. Those who need stars to see some interesting things, it's also there. So you can look at examples for it. There is something called degeneracy pressure, which tells you the fact that you cannot put all the electrons in ground state, you have to distribute them far apart. That introduce a physical pressure, just like this is like a force. It introduces something analogous to pressure, and that causes, that's the reason behind stability of certain stars. And when that pressure fights against gravity, because gravity tries to collapse them. And then at some point of time, when gravity wins, how a star goes from star to neutron star and then eventually a black hole, all those facts are like, we can go on and on this topic. That is what I'm trying to say, but I will have to stop, and this is the stopping point. But you are welcome to read. I think it's there in any quantum mechanics book.
One more
Can I
question.
stop the recording, sir, by the way?
So
Yeah,
don't stop the recording. I'd like to go listen back later on.
Okay.
Fine.
Yeah. So one more question.
Yeah, why you want to stop? I'm going to say something unparliamentary or something.
Sorry.
No, I'm saying, Adil, are you going to talk about something?
Oh no. I was just talking the official thing. That's why, because I started.
No, it is not official anyways.
Yeah, that's why. But she wants it, so it's fine.
Yeah, carry on.
So one question about the atoms. So you say that atoms are either in general atoms can be either like categorized as fermions or bosons. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me. Sorry, I am supposed to meet with Dimtoman at 5:30, but he's messaging.
Oh yeah, he
Okay,
told
tell
me
me.
about that. Sorry. Like
Okay,
one
carry
last
on.
question. Yeah. So the point is
No,
like,
you carry on.
so the point is like you classify atoms as bosons and fermions, right? So is that on the basis of the spin statistics theorem that you mentioned, or because it's all atoms are made up of composed of like protons and electrons, and they're not indistinguishable particles. So how are you
Yeah.
saying
So
that?
it depends on various things. It depends on how many electrons are there, what is their total. So a atom has no problem to be a total overall bosonic object. Right?
Okay.
Atom is a composite object.
Yeah, but then you
But
said
we
that
know
if you
electrons, and electrons are on its isolation is a but we have just seen that if we have a pair of electron, we want the whole wave function to be we want the spatial part of the wave function to be bosonic, and we figured out that how can that happen. It can only happen if their total wave function is, if the spin part is antisymmetric and the total wave function is antisymmetric. That is what we found.
That makes sense. But I'm
Now
asking,
for an atom there is no such constant. Atom can be either bosonic or fermionic.
yeah, but
So
what
it
is the
depends on how
condition?
many electrons. Yeah, so that depends on how many electron it is made of.
Hmm.
First of all, if it is made of even number of electron or odd number of electron,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
then you can try to see that whether you can write down a fully antisymmetric or symmetric wave function, and given the what spin state it exists, so that all these factors together decide what is the total spin of the atom, and that tells you what are, and since there are many possibilities, that is why we have this yeah, so actually there are not many possibilities. So if you have a given number of electrons in an atom, then that roughly decides what will be the total. So for example, this problem I gave you, this rubidium 87, that is a bosonic atom. So if you want to do experiment with fermion, you choose some other atom, right? So
Okay.
87 means there will be 87 electrons, there will be a spatial part, there will be a spin part. So I have to think about a little bit that how do I calculate exactly, but it's a good question.
I actually
Yes.
was going through a bunch of like sites and all while you were talking. Sorry about that. To like
Yeah, so,
see
so no, so this calculation actually, this you will see that one can do this calculation in principle, but I am a bit rusty on that. So there is this term factor for what is this term symbol or something in spectroscopy. You will learn it in atomic molecular physics.
We did that,
So
sir.
you did that in
Oh,
chemistry,
you
right?
already did. So there
Yeah,
is
yeah,
a-
yeah.
So
It's there
that's
in
why-
atomic molecular physics too.
yeah, so you calculate the total angular momentum, spin angular momentum of a whole, a big atom, right? A big
2s
atom.
plus 1, basically, like
So
capital
that
S.
way you know what is the spin part is going to do. Now the space part, for that you have to see what are the possible things you can write down with that many atoms. And usually I think the odd or even, the multiplicity of the electrons, that tells you what kind of wave functions you can write down with it.
Yeah, so the definition that I saw that was that if you have even number of protons, neutrons, and electrons, then it's generally going to be a bosonic atom. And if it's odd, then it'll be a fermionic atom. So I was just thinking,
So
like,
bosonic means they can be symmetric or antisymmetric. So
Yeah.
symmetric I can understand, but antisymmetric.
Do
For
we even
example,
have a spatial antisymmetric?
you can have. So spatial antisymmetry. Okay, that's a good question.
yeah, what would that
No,
mean?
no. That will make the whole thing unstable.
Exactly, sir. So NLM,
That
like
will
psi
make the whole-
NLM.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah,
we
That
have?
is
fair
the
enough.
statement. So you need spatial symmetry for stability. Now, in order to get spatial symmetry, if you want the whole object to be bosonic, then the only thing you have to decide what the spins are doing. So if you can show that the total spin is 0 or half integer or integer, then you know immediately what is the fate of the atom. Yeah, that's a good point.
Exactly. So I'm asking, like, but then it's composed of like it's made up of different types of particles, right? They're not.
Again,
They're all
different
distinguishable.
type doesn't matter, right?
You said that if they're distinguishable, then you can't just say that they are.
No, so electronic spin and nuclear spin are different objects, so you can think about it separately.
Exactly. So in that case, can you just SAE add up the spins and say that they're bosonic and fermionic?
I
That was
don't
my
think.
question.
I
No,
don't think so, because we are not even introduced to the nuclear spin for now.
Yeah, you cannot
And
add.
yeah.
This is separate object. You have to add it separately. You cannot add this in the put it in the same footing.
Exactly. So if you say you have, okay, no, that wouldn't be possible. Fair enough. Okay. Oh, I'm dumb. Okay. Never mind.
So you are, when you are talking about a atom is electronic or bosonic, you are talking about its total electronic spin.
Okay.
But
Why don't you consider the
then-
proton spins?
Yeah, I have to think a little bit. So probably you will get the same thing.
So actually, I was just thinking that if the number of electrons is even, definitely the number of protons will also be
Yes.
even. So
Yes.
then you can kind of say that in
It
both
is
of
2
the
times
cases,
even. Yeah.
yeah, they're separately like giving you integral spins.
Yes.
So that then you can say it is bosonic
Yeah.
or fermionic. So that
That
should
is
be enough of a. That was what I was thinking. Yeah, then.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But then the neutrons also have spin, and they can be like weird in the sense that you don't have.
Can we do that, sir? Can we do that? Because like wherever these spin things come in or things like that, they ignore the till now all the books that
Yeah,
I've
so
read,
you
they
don't
ignore the
do it
nuclear
like that.
spin.
So if a full wave function of an atom, it will have the proton part, the neutron part, and the electron part. Okay. Now these are all distinguishable objects. Now each of these part is a product of whatever it is there inside. 5pi, the product of I. No, the symbol is this. Okay, with whatever degrees of freedom, let me call it some L that contains the S. So this is just this part alone. Now this part is also similar, some psi n, and this part is also similar, some psi e, a product of them, individual component. So that is your total wave function. Okay? Now when you are adding angular momentum, I have to think this a bit. Why I am not adding the angular momentum of this, and this?
Yeah, I was going to ask exactly that. Okay.
I have to think. I cannot
Okay.
immediately figure it out. So think of the simplest example. Helium atom, what is the structure of that? Does helium atom has a
For two, it has like two neutrons, two electrons, and two protons. Helium, like alpha particle, is like helium double
Yeah,
charged.
so
So
2
for two,
electron, 2 proton, and 2 neutron, right? And
yeah.
2 neutron, 2 proton, and 2 electrons somewhere. So this is the simplest example of that. So the helium atom is the full wave function is like, let me call it like P some L.
Why are you not considering hydrogen?
Hydrogen has no neutron.
Yeah, but it.
Yeah, I can also consider hydrogen, right?
Yeah.
So psi.
So according like from whatever searching I've done so far, I've found a few sources, and they seem to say that hydrogen is also bosonic. And if hydrogen is bosonic, then you can add the angular momentum to SAE, irrespective of the fact.
No,
that
you can. So the thing is that you can add the angular momentum. So you can think this problem as like a. See, in principle, the hydrogen atom is a two-body problem, right? So two-body problem means you have these two particle, and then there is a Hamiltonian which has the coordinate of the electron and the proton. And these are distinguishable particles, so it is not a problem. So that is why I am not considering hydrogen.
So
The reason you are saying the question of angular momentum addition.
yeah.
So
sir, and one question, like one remark out here. So while we were doing the Stern-Gerlach thing, so we used the silver atoms, right? So the reason for silver atom was like they have only one electron at the orbital, and the other spins cancel each other out. We
yeah,
didn't
so
even
if you have an odd number of
we didn't even yes sir, we didn't even consider the spin of protons out there. So
Oh, yeah, good point.
So yeah, and I checked it by hand, like
What
doing
is the
the
number of
orbital thing.
what is the number of protons and neutrons in?
I think so 47, 48, something like that, like the
Let me just-
electrons and
let me-
protons.
Silver, right? It is 47 protons. So that's an odd number of protons. There should be an extra half spin. Why didn't we consider that? And the number of neutrons is also odd. That's a good point. That's a good point.
That's what. So all the 46, 46 electrons are like packed up, and there is one half shelled. Like I think so. If I'm not wrong, is 4d10 and 5s1. So it is 4d9 and 5s2. So one electron from the s comes to d9. So it becomes d10 and s1. So that s1 is the one that is that is basically showing the split in the Stern-Gerlach experiment. And that time we don't even consider what you say, the spin
Proton
of
and neutron
protons and
spin.
neutrons. Yeah. So I don't think so we can do that thing.
But then why,
Like-
shouldn't the spin of proton and neutron make a difference?
As
No,
far as
because if the spin is spin. So
Exactly, that's an
Spin-
angular momentum. That should make a difference, right? Even if you're saying that the electron spin is one, I mean, like in the sense there's only the effective spin is just of one electron. The proton and neutron spin are still there. So you have to consider that also. I don't know why we always say that there's only the half spin there.
the question boils down to why you don't add the spins of hydrogen. When you say, so usually when you say quote the total spin of hydrogen atom, you say it is spin half, right?
yes,
I mean, that is the usual statement.
yeah.
But why do you say that? So,
Sir, can I I have a speculation out here. So the thing is that whenever we are talking about
actually,
atomic,
this is not true. The hydrogen atom can be. This is not true. You don't say that, right? So if you can say actually it has all these possibilities, because a hydrogen atom can be in it. There are, as far as total spin is concerned, it can be is like it total angular spin angular momentum can be all these things, which is triplet or singlet. That means two spin half. All the possible thing you can do to two spin halves, right? You can either make a spin 0 or you can make a spin +1 -1, like this singlet triplet thing. Right? So the total hydrogen atom can be in that state.
sir, I think so. This entire thing cannot be written because, like, whenever we are talking of electron spin, we are talking about the wave function of electron only. But
No,
when
but this statement,
but once we are regarding the proton or neutron, we have to say that the wave function of the proton and neutron, right?
so no. Now I remember this whole argument. I think this is true, that you can add the electrons. So when you say a total angular momentum of an atom, then you add the spin of everything, and that's why you the hydrogen have this state, right? Para hydrogen, ortho hydrogen. What is it? So let me just Google it. Para hydrogen. What is the spin of that? Para hydrogen is spin isomers of hydrogen. Yeah, Google that. So this is true. You can add all of them and you will get these things. Oh, this is molecular hydrogen. But anyway, no,
that is
different.
that.
I
Yeah,
have a-
yeah.
That is different. That
I
is
think
different.
I kind of have an idea. I don't know if it's right. It's just a speculation. So the point is like in the case of electrons, you have electrons pairing up in the orbitals. So because of that, you only have the effective spin of the one electron outside because everything else is cancelled out. But inside the nucleus, you can say that all of the spins are randomly arranged. So it's effectively cancelling out because of the randomness.
No, the point goes back to this, so which I'm myself I got confused about
No, I'm
for
just
some
saying.
time, but
I'm
I think
just
this is finally true that the total spin. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. The
No,
total
I agree.
spin should
Yeah.
be S1 plus S2, which is electron, and this is protons.
I agree to that. I'm talking about the case of the Stern-Gerlach, where you only talk about the the one spin of the electron, right? You say that
it's Stern-Gerlach. Okay.
yeah. That's why I'm saying that inside the nucleus, all of the spins are randomly aligned. I like that could be the reason. If that's so, you can say that it's effectively zero.
You can't say that it's randomly aligned assay, right? Because the wave
You
function
can't-
that we deal about is electronic wave function, right? Means the wave function of the electron. We don't even know
I'm talking
the
about
wave function of
I'm
proton or
talking
neutron.
about I'm talking about the
So
experimental.
how many electrons are there in silver atom?
47.
47 electrons, 47 protons, and
47 electrons.
51 neutrons.
So
Okay.
and it's D10 S1 system for electron.
Basically, there's one electron in the outer shell. That's the
One
relevant.
electron in the outer shell. So
Yeah,
that is why it is electronic spin half. Now what
Yeah.
about the nuclear spin? So
That's why I said that maybe because it's like randomly aligned, you can effectively say that the contribution
no,
due to that.
even if it is, yeah, okay.
So you can
Wait,
kind of
even if
neglect the
it is
contribution.
randomly aligned, it can be
Like the case of a paramagnet, basically. That's what I was going for.
yeah, that I understand, but this is not the same as.
In paramagnet, we talk
Yeah,
the
I
spin
refer to
about electron, right? We talk about the electrons. Yeah, which is a spin.
Oh yeah, every case you only talk about the electrons. Why is the spin of the
Because
I have to
energetically,
think about that. So because of course, when you declare that what is the total spin of that object, you should keep this both of these together, right?
Yeah.
So that is definitely true.
Yeah, that's how the
So the
bosons and
hydrogen atom, it can be 0 or 1, like so this singlet or triplet. The total spin is 0, which means the hydrogen atom has to be bosonic.
yes.
So if you have a thing with, so that is true. There is no doubt about that. But the question is different now. So the question is, if we are doing an experiment with something like that, then why are we not adding? So if there are 46 electrons, that means there are 46 protons also.
47
7
electrons.
electrons and
47,
protons.
okay?
47 electrons are there in silver. 47
47.
electrons, 47
Yeah,
protons.
probably. So, but this is a, what will I say? This is a jugar fix, but I have to think about it once more. Is that it is because there are 3 types of particle for silver, right? Electron, proton, and neutron.
Yes, sir.
So
So
if
this
you
has we can address this problem through an experimental point of view. So we see that silver is a D10 S1 system, right? What if we select
no, that doesn't address
other
the question. I am saying
yeah
why
yeah
the nuclear spin is not added. So let me think about it. I think this could
exactly.
be has to do with the scales of the problem, because of the
Okay,
nuclear
okay.
spin is probably
As far as like I have read about the nuclear spin in context of statistical mechanics, where they discuss the third law of thermodynamics. It is given in the Reeves book. They don't consider the nuclear spin energy. So they consider
that is
that
fine.
So they say that it's really small, so we can just ignore, like really
Oh,
small.
okay. Now sorry. Yeah.
That's
So
how I
thank
say
you.
that. I say
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So that's what I totally forgot this. I mean, I was like, is the problem of thinking too much theoretically. Yeah. So there is this factor, right? G2 mu b times the speed, right? This is the angular
Yeah.
momentum.
Yes, sir.
So this factor G and mu b, they are different. They depend on the mass of the object.
Oh,
Okay,
right,
okay.
And that is
Yes.
inverse. So that is why, even though the spin is there, the angular magnetic moment it generates is almost 0.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So then that's why you ignore it.
This is like the gyroscopic constant and all that.
Yes, the
Gyromagnetic
gyroscopic
constant.
constant and
Gyroscopic.
all that. Yeah.
Right, okay.
This is a problem of thinking too much theoretically. So we should sometimes wear experimental hats and look at numbers, because we know you theorists always ignore these things, which we should not. Like we take h bar equal to 1, c equal to 1, k equal to 1, and all those things we do. So I was in my head, I took that.
Okay, sir.
That is why nuclear
Okay.
spin, in order to talk with nuclear spin, you need a very strong magnetic field.
Okay, that part makes sense. But then, when you talk about bosonic and fermionic atoms, you still consider the spin, like the number of spins of all of them, and then say, because for
That
example,
is true. That is why
Yeah.
this one is 0 or 1, like hydrogen atom, right?
yeah, so it's a difference in talking about the angular momentum part and difference in talking about the bosonic fermionic
Yes.
character. Okay.
Yes.
So
Now
okay, now
everything is
because
clear, right?
you have agreed that hydrogen is a boson, because I said this in the earlier in the class, then you can say that you can just take the atoms and say that they'll come close together anyway because they're
No, though that
bosons.
is the problem. So you cannot think it as a closed shell object when you are bringing things together, right? then the electrons in the
Okay.
atoms are closer than these. So
Oh,
now
okay,
it is
like that.
whole
Okay.
simplex.
Mm.
It's a combined object of 2 electrons plus 2 protons. It
This
is not
is
very
that makes
clear who is who.
this
Yeah,
is
that
the
makes
exact premises of the tight binding model. How to solve this
Yeah,
problem?
this is
That's
also kind of, but you can do a molecular tight binding model, and that's why this molecular orbital theory and all that are basically there.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
So tight binding model is so yeah. So that is why when you bring things closer, then it becomes a 2 electron 2 proton problem.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, is everything clear?
Yes.
For now, yes, sir.
Okay, good. Okay, thanks for these questions. See you.
Thank you, sir, for explaining.
Thank you.
Bye.